Hi everyone. So we are in chapter 20 of Revelation today. To cover this section, I'm going to have to give you some different interpretations of this passage, and you might feel as if you're kind of drowning in information. So just take your time going through it, and once we've done that part, we'll try and walk through the passage to try to make some application for us based on the things we know to be sure. If you want to see the different interpretations in visual form, Google millennialism or the millennium, and then check out Wikipedia on the subject. And if you scroll down the Wikipedia page, there's a chart with 4 views of the millennium on the right-hand side of the page. If you look at this chart, while we're talking about some of this, it will help you grab these different views and understand them. The event that is in this chapter is known as the second coming. It is the moment Jesus returns to earth for the second time. It is fairly strongly contested due to different ways people interpret this. And the part that is most debated is around the 1,000-year reign of Jesus. Will it be a literal reign of a literal 1,000 years? Will it be a physical reign on earth, or will it be spiritual? When will it begin? When will it end? What is the order of events? Those are all debated topics. There are 4 main points of view, and I'm going to try and explain these to you. We have to remember that people have debated this throughout church history. People much smarter than any of us hold differing views on this. And that's okay. We have to have a degree of humility and grace for each other as we consider the topic. There are a few things that each of these views hold in common. All believe that Jesus will have total victory over Satan, that he will reign uncontested, and that believers will share in his glory and in his victory. All of those are truths we can rejoice in and hold on to. The second coming is often seen as having 2 parts. The first part is sometimes called the secret coming, or the rapture, and it's the moment when Jesus will take believers to be with himself. It would not involve a physical return to earth. Depending on what you believe about how this is going to work out, that may be at least 7 years before the event he fulfills in this passage that we're looking at today, or it might be immediately before, or it might, in some views, even be immediately after. The second part of the second coming is what we usually mean when we refer to the second coming. So the 1,000-year reign of Jesus is sometimes called the millennium. The first part of that word, the mil part, means 1,000, and the annum part means year. So millennium just literally means 1,000 years, 1,000 years. So here are the 4 views. The first view is called amillennialism. The A in front of the word millennial means no. So in this view, there is no millennium. Now, it's not that people don't believe in the millennium or in the reign of Christ, but that they believe that it is a spiritual reign of Jesus rather than a physical one. They believe that this reign is in his people, and that the rapture of believers comes after the reign of Jesus through his people for some period of time. Amillennialists believe that as the world is evangelized, the reign of Jesus will be seen in the church. There will come a time, however, when there is a rebellion and a conflict, and then Jesus will come, usher in the eternal state, the new heavens and the new earth. In this view, Satan is seen as being bound in some ways, in that he is not allowed to resist the advance of the kingdom. He's bound in some respects, but has free reign in others, free rule in others. The second view is called post-millennialism. Post means after. This is a view that you may not have heard of. In this understanding of Scripture, the evangelism of the earth is thought to bring about sort of a golden age. And through the spread of the gospel, the conditions on earth will improve. Christ will reign through his people. Once the earth reaches a certain point of faith, Jesus will return, gather up his people, and the eternal state will begin. So the second coming of Jesus is seen as coming after his reign. The third and fourth view are both called premillennialist views, but there are slight differences between them. Pre means before. In this particular point of view, Jesus returns before the 1,000-year reign, and his reign is seen to be physical. He would be physically on earth and reigning for that period of time on earth. During that time, those who believe in this would believe that Satan would be bound, so he is not able to interfere at all on events on the earth. Jesus would be king over the whole earth, and then after a literal 1,000 years, Satan would be released for a short time. Following that, the eternal state would be ushered in, and the new heavens and the new earth. The premillennialist view also takes the events of these last chapters of Revelation as being chronological. There are two variations in the premillennialist view. There is dispensational premillennialism and historic premillennialism. Historic premillennialism is also called, on the chart in Wikipedia, post-tribulation premillennialism. The differences between these has to do with the timing of the rapture of the church and some details about the tribulation. Dispensational premillennialists believe that the church will be removed either at the beginning of the tribulation or at the middle of it. The historic premillennialists, also called the post-tribulation premillennialists, believe the church will be raptured at the end of the tribulation and before the beginning of the 1,000-year reign. There are some variations in these views, but that gives you a general idea of the different perspectives. Now, it's pretty impossible for a person to teach through this passage without you kind of figuring out what the teacher believes on the subject. So I'm just going to tell you that I am a premillennialist. I tend toward dispensational premillennialism. I am not going to argue with anybody about this, but it is good for us to kind of have an understanding of what the different perspectives are. Okay, with all that said, chapter 20. Okay, we're going to read the first 3 verses of chapter 20. And I saw an angel coming out of heaven, having the key to the abyss, and holding in his hand a great chain. He seized the dragon, that ancient serpent, which is the devil or Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. He threw him into the abyss and locked and sealed it over him to keep him from deceiving the nations any more until the 1,000 years were ended. After that, he must be set free for a short time. Okay, first of all, there's this angel with this key to the abyss. Now, this may or may not be the same angel we had back in chapter 9, verse 2, who had the key to the abyss there. The abyss carries the idea of sort of a bottomless place, and it's connected with the place where the fallen angels are confined while they await eternal judgment. The angel has a key and a huge chain. He seizes the dragon, and the passage gives us a variety of names for this dragon, so we're not in any doubt as to who's being bound here. It says the dragon, the ancient serpent, the devil, or Satan. This is the great enemy of God and of us who is being bound here. God does not want us to misunderstand who he's locking up. There are a number of words used to describe what is being done to Satan. He is seized, bound, thrown, locked, sealed, and kept from deceiving the nations till the 1,000 years are done. Although it doesn't specifically say so, it seems likely his demons will be confined as well during this time. Now, this picture of the total control and power of God is in view. Satan is an ancient enemy, powerful and evil, but when the time is right, he is confined. So he cannot work against God. There's no struggle. The angel simply takes Satan and binds him. Now, and then there's this short sentence at the end of verse 3. After that, he must be set free for a short time. Did you wonder why he must be set free? Well, there are a few different ideas as to how this works out, and this applies more to verses 7 to 10, but let's talk about it here for a second. Okay, so when Jesus comes and defeats the beast and his army and kills all those who fought for the beast, there will be human beings, it seems, left alive, if this is a chronological recitation here, who will be left alive on earth when Satan is bound and the reign of Jesus begins. And again, this fits what I'm saying right now, fits best with the premillennialist view. These people will love and obey God, have faith in God, but they will still have their sin nature, just as you and I still have ours today. These people will marry and have children during the reign of Christ, and those children will be born with a sin nature, as our children are born with a sin nature, even though we might have been a believer when we had them. They will live, these people and their children will live under the rule of Christ. They will not have the temptations of Satan nor opportunities for sin that exist today, but their hearts would still be inclined towards sin. They would have a sin nature. So one suggestion is that these people will repopulate the earth, nations will be formed, all living under the rule of Jesus, but sin and a sin nature will still be present. The views that have the rule of Jesus as being through the church, it would mean that these people would live in the golden age. They may not understand what it would be like not to live under the rule of Jesus. So one possible reason for Satan must be released is that his release will show these sinful people their own sin nature, for he will deceive them again. And then the final judgment of God, when it happens, will be clearly seen to be just. Well, we better get moving because we've spent quite a bit of time already, and we're only on verse 3. So verse 4 says that there are thrones, and those on them have authority to judge. He sees the souls who have been beheaded for the testimony of Jesus. They have not worshipped the beast or taken his mark. They rise from the dead, and they're going to reign with Christ. The rest of the dead will not live till the 1,000 years is up. And it calls this the first resurrection. Okay, so what's going on here? Who is it that is going to reign on these thrones? Is it the martyred? Or is it specifically only those who are martyred by being beheaded? Is it all believers? How do we figure this out? So let's look at a couple of other verses in Revelation and see if it sheds some light. Start back at Revelation chapter 2, verse 26. To the one who is victorious and does my will to the end, I will give authority over the nations. And then chapter 5, verses 9 and 10. And they sang a new song, saying, you are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, because you were slain, and with your blood you purchased men from God, you purchased persons from every tribe, language, people, and nation. You made them to be a kingdom and priests and serve our God, and they will reign on the earth. And then chapter 12, verse 11, they triumph over him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. They do not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. So there seems to be correlation between those who are rewarded for laying down their own will for their lives and those who die physically for their faith. We are called not to love our lives so much as to shrink back from death. But only God gets to decide if the cost of our obedience will be dying to self or dying physically. I would think that if the reward for reigning was going to be given only to those who died physically, were martyred for their faith, then there are going to be people who would seek that reward by trying to be martyred. There are other religions in which this happened. It seems that the majority of Scripture says that the call is for us to lay down our will, to die to ourselves, to take up our cross and follow Jesus. Revelation 12:11, which we just read, says we are not to love our lives so much as to shrink from death. But it doesn't say we're to seek death. And then there's the part about those who are beheaded. I think it is unlikely that the reward is only for people who die in a specific way. What about those who are starved to death in prison, or burned alive, or died by being thrust through with the sword? I think these represent all who laid down their lives as living sacrifices, whether that calls for physical death or not, on behalf of Jesus. So, the conclusion seems to be it is believers who will reign with Christ, and he will give us authority to rule. Now, this is a physical resurrection. If you want to read more about it, you can read 1 Corinthians 15 and also 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. The question sometimes is asked, over whom will we reign, or over what? And there are a few possible answers. And again, your perspective on end times might change that. One possible answer is over nature. We would reign over creation itself. Or it might be that we reign over the nations that will expand on the earth during this time, and we will be reigning over actual people and governments. Whatever this looks like, the reality is we will be raised to a position that is higher than what we have now and higher than we deserve. God in grace is going to gift us with the honor of reigning with him. Now, there are tons of Old Testament passages that tell us about what this time will be like. Again, it's going to depend on whether you think it's a literal physical reign or not, but it could be a pretty spectacular period of time. The world will be free from the work of Satan and will know the rule of the only true, just, and righteous King. There will be peace, no crime, no war. According to Isaiah 65:25, the lion and the lamb will lie down together. So it sounds as if even nature itself will function differently than it does today. I always hoped that this would be a time when wild animals would be safe to handle, because I'd really love to pet a tiger. Don't know about you, but I've always wanted to do that. And in Isaiah 65:20, it tells us that if a man dies at the age of 100, he will thought to have died as a child. Wow. So long life will be the norm. Now again, depending on your end times viewpoint, you might think these promises are not literal but figurative, so keep that in mind. Then there is this phrase, this is the first resurrection. There are, it seems, two separate physical resurrections. The first is the resurrection of the believing dead who are raised to enter this kingdom and to rule with God. And they are doubly alive. They are alive spiritually and alive to dwell with God. And of course, they're also alive physically. But the other group, the unbelieving dead, will not be raised until this is over. The unbelieving dead will be raised physically for the final judgment, and they are the double dead. They are dead in that they are spiritually dead, and they are going to go to eternal death, which is separation from God forever. Both groups will be raised physically and have physical life, but their condition is defined as being dead or alive based on their spiritual condition and their final destination. The resurrection of the unbelieving dead for judgment is sometimes called the second death. Verse 6 says, "Blessed unholy are those who have part in the first resurrection," that's of the believing dead, "for over them the second death has no power." In verse 7, Satan is released and he goes out and deceives the nations of the earth. He will gather them to battle, to fight against the Lord again. Now you may have wondered why he bothered to do that, considering the failure of his last attempt. I mean, did he expect a different result? Well, I think he does. I think he does this because he hates God and he hates everything God loves, and rebellion and destruction is just part of his nature. It's what he is. It's the core of his character. He can't help trying to do these things simply because it's who he is, even if he knows he's going to fail. It's like that old fable of the scorpion who begged for a ride across a river on the back of a horse. When they were halfway across, the scorpion stung the horse. And the horse said, "Why did you do that? Now we're both going to die." "I know," said the scorpion, "but I couldn't help it. It's just who I am." Satan is hugely successful in his deception because it says that the number of those who are deceived is as vast as the sand on the seashore, and they gather from all around the world to do battle against God. Now, depending on your view, this may be an actual physical gathering, or it may be fulfilled in some other way. If it's a physical gathering, then one question is, where will it take place? The passage says they surround the camp of God's people, the city he loves. That may be Jerusalem, if this is at a physical location. The willingness of humans who have lived under the perfect, peaceful, happy reign of Jesus to rebel is a bit horrifying. You might wonder how they can do that. Well, I'm guessing it will be similar to how Satan approached Eve in the garden when she and Adam were also living under the perfect rule of God. He will appeal to their desire to rule for themselves. He will lie, saying that God is denying them good things. He may try and tell them that they have the power to run the earth just fine on their own and they don't need God. This just shows the power of sin in the human heart. As with the previous battle, Satan has great success in drawing people's hearts away from God and into rebellion, but no success in the battle. Fire comes down from heaven and devours them. Satan is thrown into a lake of burning sulfur where the beast and the false prophet are already confined, and they will be tormented forever, never again to be free. And this is the end of Satan. The final victory over him is complete. These passages give us hope for the end of our ancient enemy. It gives hope that evil will be stopped. It should fill us with gratitude for the salvation that rescues you and me from being among those who keep on rebelling and ends up being one of the double dead. In light of the differing points of view on these events, what can we agree on that we can take from this chapter? Well, first, the human heart is inclined toward rebellion and evil and sin. Even when we live under his perfect rule, we are inclined to disobedience. Humans just keep looking for an opportunity. That's sad, but true. The second point follows that one. Since it is true that we are naturally rebellious, the judgment of God is just. It is deserved. Even when God gives us perfect living conditions, we rebel. That rebellion will demonstrate the just and right nature of the final judgment that's going to come in the next few verses. Another thing to learn is that those who have obeyed God in faith will be given far more than they deserve. The sinful get what they deserve. The believers in grace get more than they could ever have earned. We will reign with Jesus, elevated to a place we never deserved and could not attain on our own. And finally, human history ends with the victory of God. This rebellion, which is put down by God, is the final moment of human history. After this, people go to their eternal destination, and there is a new heaven and a new earth. This final event shows us that God wins. Blessed are those who are part of the first resurrection, for they will have no part in the second death.